Hi, Lawrence LeBrocq, Managing Partner of Garces, Grabler, and LeBrocq, here on our podcast, Victim to Victory, Triumph Over Tragedy. Today we're lucky enough to have with us today Cullen Millsap as our guest. Welcome to the show, Cullen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up, the travels, and some tribulations. So talk about as a kid. You said your dad was he in the Army, Navy?
He was in the Navy. He was an officer in the Navy. So, yeah, my dad he started out enlisted, went to college, became an officer, and so I was actually born in Groton, Connecticut, where he was stationed for 2 years. And before that, my sister was born in San Diego. So after Connecticut, we were moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and then Hawaii, and then Virginia Beach. And so I was in Virginia Beach from first grade to eighth grade. So all that moving was before first grade when I was essentially a kid.
So at least you got to spend your entire grammar school in one location.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky. I think that it's not very common for military families to be in one specific place longer than a couple of years.
Right.
So he was lucky. He was kind of towards the end of his career. He had taken a desk job. Prior to that, he was a dive officer. So, he was always around dive ships. So
Sure.
That's kind of what dictated his duty station. And so towards the end of his career, he took more of a desk job. So we were able to stick around in Virginia Beach.
Okay, where did you go after Virginia?
My dad is originally from Evergreen, Alabama. I don't know if you've heard of this small town.
Don't know where Evergreen is.
In Jackson, but yeah, it's a small town in Alabama where he grew up, and so he wanted to move back down south after he retired, and so he got a job teaching ROTC in Mobile, Alabama, which is where we moved, where I went to high school, and then now I live across the bay, which is in Daphne, so across the Mobile Bay at the bottom.
So let's talk a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing, and there's a lot of addiction in your family. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I had a pretty good childhood in terms of, family life. I went to, being in a military family, the military kind of keeps everybody on the straight and narrow. And so, at least for me, it didn't get to be a problem until we moved to Alabama, because being in the Navy, I guess, helps you conform. So anyway, my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family, as far back as they know, they've all been alcoholics. There's been a history of alcoholism on both sides of my family. And, looking back, probably what part of the reason my mom and dad ended up together, because I think it just starts out fun, right? You're drinking in college and it's fun, and then it progresses. So yeah, there's just been a history of it, and both of them were what I would call functioning alcoholics, even throughout his military time.
Yep.
And it just started to get worse once he left the military. Didn't really, know what he wanted to. He had already retired from a job, so he was just kind of adrift, sort of. At least I think is the way he felt. So that's kind of the extent of the addiction in our family. But like I said, it started to get worse when I was in high school. My dad was out. He didn't have the Navy anymore to fall back on. He could kind of do his own thing in the civilian world, and so he never really found his way after that. But
Right.
He left home at 17 to enlist in the Navy because of how severe an alcoholic his mother was. His dad died when he was 7 years old. He was a drinker and a smoker, but he died from a brain aneurysm. So, drinking and smoking probably led to that, but it wasn't really like alcohol
Sure.
related. So, of course, my mom, her side of the family, they were all functioning alcoholics too. They led a pretty normal, successful life, but all with there's always the undertone or the background of drinking. So, like I said, my dad, he never really, actually, it all came to a head with my mother when this is probably about 10 years ago. I was already married. I didn't have a child yet, but I think we had a child on the way. She got really sick, and nobody really knew what was wrong. And I was living away. I think I was living in Atlanta at the time after college, and I was away. So my mom and dad were home, but they had kind of, in terms of their relationship, kind of gone their separate ways, living together but leading separate lives.
Sure.
So anyway, my mom got really sick, and I came down to help out to see what was going on. I figured we'd go to the doctor and they would fix whatever was going on. Turns out she had end-stage liver disease, which is essentially cirrhosis.
Right.
And we went from thinking she's sick and they're gonna help her to like, we can make her comfortable, but this is pretty much it. So it was like, this was in Mobile. We were essentially preparing for her death when her family said, hey, come to Atlanta. All her family's in Atlanta. She lives in Atlanta now, but all her family said, come to Atlanta, we'll take care of you. She and my dad weren't, like I said, they were leading separate lives. And so she went to Atlanta. She started getting seen at Emory Hospital. You know where this is?
Yes.
Yeah, Emory, it's a great hospital.
Great hospital, yes.
So the doctors in Mobile said, we can make her comfortable. I mean, we can get her on a transplant list, but she has to show at least a year of sobriety, but she's very sick, et cetera. So then when she got to Atlanta, they said, you are very sick and you are supposed to show sobriety for a year before you go on the transplant list, but you don't have a year. And you've got, they saw a good support group from her side of the family, me, my sister, her sister, brother, mom, et cetera. They said, we're going to go ahead and put you on the transplant list. And so we were like, wow, that's great news, but it's still going to be a while. This can take forever. And so about 3 months later, honestly, she got a call and said that they got a match for her liver. So they rushed her to the hospital. She went into surgery for like 10 or 12 hours and came out with a new liver and a new person.
Really?
Yeah. So, she had essentially been overtaken by this cirrhosis where, it causes jaundice and yellow eyes and your fluid buildup and your liver's not functioning properly, so the toxins go to your head. So we didn't even recognize her as a person, her personality, to all of a sudden a new liver, and she wakes up and she's the same person that she always was. It was bizarre.
That is bizarre.
Yeah.
And how's your mom doing now?
She's good. She's sober, luckily. She lives in Atlanta. My sister lives in Atlanta, so she helps with my sister. My sister's got 3 kids, so she helps take them to school and babysit, and she's got her hands full with, she does junior league and works at like a consignment store, so she's enjoying it.
Well, that's a great story.
Yeah.
But now, how did this affect you? Because a lot of times the kids can go either way. They follow in the footsteps of the parents and
Yeah.
they start drinking heavily. I mean, me growing up, my dad was drinking Dewar's and drank a lot of Budweiser.
Yeah.
And for me, I'd come home from practice, whatever sport it was, and drink a beer. I mean, I might have been 14 years of age, come home, and that was just a natural thing to do. Get those electrolytes back in you, have a couple beers, right? So it could go either way.
Very much, yeah.
So, and how did it work out for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I was always very conscious, and it affected me so deeply, I think, that I intentionally kind of steered away from it. But I never really felt like I had a problem or that I could have a problem,
Right.
luckily. Sometimes they say it skips a generation, but it was always in the back of my head, like even through the Marine Corps and through college. It was like, if I felt like I was getting a little too, if I'd gone out 2 or 3 nights a week or something like that, I was like, okay, this
Reel it back in.
is enough, yeah. And I don't know, I have to imagine that that's kind of what happened with them, and then they just kind of went with it instead of fighting back against it. And we talked about my mom. She was great. I mean, she essentially raised us, I would say, because my dad was deployed with the military, and then when he was home, there was obviously some drinking going on, and so through her faults of drinking, she was still a very good mother. She cared about us. She put us first, and that's why I say I had a good childhood.
Right.
The problem was really when my dad just kind of, after he retired, he just kind of lost his way, I think, and that's when it really kind of took over.
Well, speaking of now, we know your mom's clean and sober. How about your dad? Whatever happened with him?
Yeah, so my dad actually this March, next month, will be 7 years since he died by suicide. So he couldn't, like I said, he just couldn't ever figure it out. And he would get sober, and then he would relapse. He would get sober, and he would relapse. But for the majority of it, he was off the wagon, so to speak. And I think it just got to a point where he just was like, just thought like, I'm never gonna get sober. I'm never gonna be able to have the relationship that I want, because, you know, we had a fractured relationship because of these things. Like, you think the best thing to do is to distance yourself for your own well-being and mental health. And of course that causes problems for the addict, right? So
Sure.
I think he just felt like, you know, this was it for him. And, you know, he was in his 60s, so he had lived a pretty decent life in terms of being successful within the Navy. And then I think once he got out, he was lost, you know.
Yep.
Never could find his way back.
How did his suicide affect you and your family?
It's a tough topic for me to speak about, because the weirdest feeling in the world is, you know, feeling grief, but also feeling relief at the same time. You know, it's tough we had young children, my sister had young kids. It was taking a toll on me, like I said, mentally, because we were always wondering, where is he? What is he doing? Is he sober? Is he dead? You know, we just didn't know. And given that fractured relationship, he and I sometimes we were talking, sometimes we weren't. And it's hard to put into words how much it affected me mentally. And so, of course, there was grief there because he couldn't figure it out, and we couldn't take whatever was his depression, whatever was ailing him, we couldn't fix it for him. We couldn't want sobriety for him, you know. So there's grief there, but there's also relief. You know, he's not fighting or struggling anymore. He's not causing family issues anymore. So it's a weird feeling.
No, I understand. You know, I've dealt with alcoholism in the family, and it's one of those things where you can't help that person. You can try, family members can try, but until they're ready, there is nothing anybody can do, and it's rough.
100%.
Because
yeah.
you never know who you're getting.
Right.
You know, what person's coming to the house that day,
Right.
Because it could be drunk, happy dad, it could be drunk, miserable dad, or it could just be so drunk that you can't even deal with the person.
Yeah, 100%. So you went through this too?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it. So yeah, it's not pleasant. So you've overcome all of this though, and you're a successful businessman, successful family man. So what does the future hold for you?
Yeah, I mean, I love where I am right now. I have 2 children. My daughter is 7. My son is 4. And actually, you might be the first person I've told this to at the firm. We have another child on the way.
Congratulations,
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
we're having another son.
Oh, you are? You know already.
Yeah.
Great, that's incredible.
Yep, so we'll have another son. So I'll have, if all goes according to plan, a 7-year-old girl, 4-year-old boy, and a newborn here pretty soon.
All right, so you have 3. That's what I have as well, so
Yeah.
good luck to you. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So tell me about, for people that don't know, you're working with GGL now, and you actually live in Mobile, or right outside Daphne, right outside of Mobile, Alabama, and you have 2 children, and now a pregnant wife down there, family, friends, and yet you're commuting up to beautiful New Jersey every week.
Right.
Is that causing a strain on the family? How is that going?
It's going okay. You know, obviously, we all miss each other, but my wife I got to give her props. She's holding it down. She takes the kids to school. I mean, she does everything.
Sure.
She wakes them up, gets them dressed, makes their lunch, takes them to school. She handles whatever she needs to handle in the hours between drop-off and pickup.
Sure.
My son's still 4, so he's only doing a half day. So she's only got a few hours to herself a day, and then she picks him up, and you got dinner, you got activities, dance and soccer and whatever. So she's doing it all. So she's really holding it down. allowing me to do this, follow through with what we talked about a couple of years ago, you know.
Yep.
Can I share that story?
Of course.
So the current executive director, Bill Biggs, contacted me about an opportunity with GGL, and I came up here and met with Lawrence and Bill and Will, and I think we all thought it would be a good fit. And ultimately, I went home and talked about it with my wife. We prayed about it and just we're trying to figure out how we can make this work. But unfortunately, at the time, with even younger children than I have now, I regrettably had to tell Lawrence that I wouldn't be able to relocate my family at the time. And I've always regretted it. I knew that I felt like we would work really well together. I felt like, you and I spoke the same language in terms of what you wanted to do with the firm. And so when Bill took over as executive director and he said, look, I need some help at GGL, I was like, sign me up, another opportunity to follow through with what we wanted to a couple years ago. So I'm thrilled with where I am right now. The commute is tough. It'd be tough for anybody, but
Sure.
it's not too much to make this not worth it for me, if that makes sense.
What we have to do is we have some great school systems up here. We have to turn you into a snowbird and have the family come on up here and keep your place down in Mobile, Alabama as well. Because it has to be hot down there in the summer, so you probably want to be up here.
It's unbearably hot, yeah, and humid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I spent some time, I went to law school, as you know, down in Jackson, Mississippi, and you want to talk about humidity. Oh my goodness. And I went to college in South Carolina where it's warm in the summer, it's hot, but it gets crazy when you go further south in South Carolina. It gets very, very hot.
Yeah, Jackson is, I couldn't think of, when you think of hot and humid in the South, you think of Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little uncomfortable down there for a little while. But like anything else, you become used to it. Your body becomes used to, climatizes, acclimates to the temperature. Yeah. Just like up here, most people would freeze during the winters, but you'll see people walking around with light jackets on, like in shorts when it's 40 degrees, because it's been 20 degrees every day, so people think it's springtime when it's
today's like a pretty mild day, right? Warm.
For February, 50-something degrees today. It's like a spring day. This is beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit more about coming up here and what you're hoping to achieve now with GGL and with your family, growing family down in Daphne, Alabama.
Well, in terms of achievement with GGL, I see the trajectory, the upward trajectory that GGL's been on for the last couple of years. I saw it when we first met, and it's even more so now. And
it's nice to have some help, by the way. But go.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to be a part of it, And so, in terms of achievement, what does success look like here? I'm over the marketing at the moment and over the new client team. So, if we can continue meeting goals of signed cases, and we can continue, becoming a household name in not only New Jersey, but as we spread out to other areas, that's what I want to be a part of. I want GGL to be the most respected household personal injury firm, at least in Jersey, if not outside areas when we start to grow.
Right. Well, let's talk about a little bit about overcoming this adversity. How did you overcome having two parents that were alcoholics? Mom, luckily, by a miracle, survived.
Right.
Dad didn't survive.
Right.
How do you overcome that and deal with that in the future?
That's a good question. There's this cartoon, and I might butcher this, but there's a cartoon that I think explains it perfectly. It's a guy in a business suit sitting on the curb consoling what looks like a homeless, a bum, essentially, a guy who's down on his luck, maybe an addict himself, and the guy in the suit has got his arm around and consoling him. And someone asks the bum, how did you get here? And he says, my dad was an alcoholic. And then someone asks the guy in the business suit, well, how did you get here? Well, my dad was an alcoholic. So to your point, you can go one of two ways. I just chose the other way.
Right. And
how I did that, I don't know. I have a great wife. She's solid. My faith. My sister, she's a little bit older than me. She's been a big support system too. So surrounding myself, I think, with what I see as successful people.
Well, let's turn the clock back a little bit. We didn't even talk about your Marine Corps career. Let's talk about Why did you go into the Marines? What was the purpose for that? And what did the Marine Corps do for you as a person?
Yeah, so like I said, my dad was in the Navy, and for most of my life, I always kind of told myself I'll never join the military. It did a lot for my dad, but it also makes you. He was strict. Let's put it that way, right?
Sure.
He was hardcore and a strict parent. And mix that with alcohol, it's a volatile situation. So I was never anti-military. I was just like, it's not for me. Until I was a senior in high school, I was already accepted to Alabama. A lot of my buddies were going there. We were already rushing fraternities and had gone up to visit and saw what college was going to be like as a freshman. And honestly, I didn't. It just kind of clicked. I was like, I'm not ready for this mentally. I didn't feel like I was going for the right reasons, and so maybe I'll look at the military and see what they have to offer. And so I went to the recruiters that all the offices are lined up where I'm from, and I went to the Navy first because my dad was in the Navy.
Sure.
And they were actually closed, so I went next door to the Marine Corps, and they show you this video. I mean, they're great at recruiting, so they show you this video, and I was an athlete in high school, so I figured they were like, we're the best. It's the hardest. I was like, well, this is what I want to do. One day I just decided, like, I'm going to do this. I said, what are the reserves? Tell me about the reserves. They said, well, you go to all the initial training, all the same training as everybody else. You go to Parris Island for boot camp. You go to North Carolina for all the combat training, and then whatever your job is, you'll go to the school for that, and then you'll come back and check into your reserve unit, and you'll have to go 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer.
Sure.
I was like, that sounds great, because I want to go to college. So enlisted in 2003, went through all the training, went to check in. The plan was to go through the training, get to my unit, and then start college. I'm a year late. My buddies will be sophomores. I'll be a freshman, no problem. Well, the day that I checked into my unit, the first sergeant came up to me. I'm in my check-in gear. They call it service alphas, which is the green jacket and cover and stuff. And the first sergeant comes up to me and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, I'm Private Millsap. And he says, "Are you going to Iraq?" I was like, I don't know. I'm just checking in, brand new. He goes, "Give me 1 second." And he left. He came back and he goes, "You're going to Iraq." I was like, damn, I just joined the Marine Corps, right? So I've been in the Marine Corps for like 3 months. And my unit was already in California training. So I got home, I got to my reserve unit, and I was home for a week before I was in California training with the rest of my unit. So the deployment lasted a year, so that was 2004 to 2005. So I got back, and I still started, so that was my first deployment to Iraq, got back, and then still went to college, did my freshman year at college. So by this time, I'm 2 years removed from what I would have done. My buddies are rising juniors. I'm an incoming freshman. Still no big deal, right? And then I did my first year of school and got called back again for another deployment. This is 2006. So that was 2006 to 2007, also Iraq, both in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Mm-hmm. So then I get back from that. I'm 23 years old, I think, and a sophomore. I've only finished my freshman year. So I just kind of hauled ass through school, like went through during the summer, went as much as I could, took as many classes as possible, and graduated in 2010 when I was 25. So by the time I was 25, I was like, I got to get out of this college town in Tuscaloosa. So, I joined right after high school.
But what made you keep going back to college? And, after going pulled out, deployed in Iraq, I'm sure you saw some things that weren't very pleasant. Yeah. But what kept you coming back for school?
That's a good question. I think I always knew I wanted to get a degree, no matter what. Even if didn't even matter what the degree was, I just wanted to get a degree, right? And also being enlisted in the Marine Corps as a young man is okay, right? It's sort of a young man's game. It's like there's a lot of physical labor involved. If you're going to make a career, a lot of people make good careers out of being enlisted, but for me, I figured if I was going to make a career out of it, I wanted to be an officer. And in order to be an officer, you have to get a degree.
Sure.
So that's probably what kept me coming back. I wanted a degree, and if I was ever going to be an officer, I had to have one anyway.
All right, Cullen, so after 2 deployments in Iraq, you finish up school in 2010, and what was your degree in?
Business.
Okay, and then what did you do?
Actually, in 2010, when I graduated, it was a time where there was not, I mean, it sounds weird to say now, but there were not a lot of jobs out there. So people were lucky to get jobs, any job out of college. I mean, people were going to work in restaurants because they couldn't get a job within their degree. So for one reason or another, and I met my wife, my now wife, we dated through college. She got a job back in Fairhope, which is next to Daphne in Alabama. My aunt worked at Coca-Cola in Atlanta. So she got me a job at a hotel there. So I worked in a hotel for the first 2 years out of college and working in the food and beverage division. Right. And I quickly learned that was not for me. Bad hours, bad pay.
Right, and so what was next?
Next, I just kind of, my wife and I were getting serious. We had gotten engaged. I didn't love Atlanta. I liked it okay. I didn't like being away from the water. There wasn't a lot to do. I didn't feel like, so I came back down south and just kind of worked my way through management positions within different industries. And then I hooked up with this other Marine who he had started a nonprofit for veterans, and he needed somebody, while he was doing that, he needed someone to run his for-profit business, which happened to be a litigation support business. So I worked, while he was getting this nonprofit started, I was the CEO of this legal tech company. It was e-discovery, you're familiar. And that's what led to going in-house at a firm down along the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Alabama Gulf Coast. And so that's how I ended up in the law firm world. And once I did, I was like, this is, for whatever reason, maybe same as you, I love the way contingency law firms run. I love the way that the work flows, the way that the cash flows. It's a great business. And so once I started, I never had any plans of doing anything else. And so here I am now, after working with a few different firms and now with GGL.
Right. So any struggles along the way with you personally with alcohol, or you just always just kept it in check?
No, I mean, like in college, I probably drank too much. I think a lot of people did. But I could probably attribute it a lot to my wife. She's not a big drinker, big partier. She was in a sorority, I was in a fraternity, so we had our share of fun, but she's never been a big drinker, so that probably had something to do with it. Right. I'm not going to sit around at the house and drink, but it's always in the back of my head as something that could become a problem. Right. Now the next thing for me to worry about is my children, right? So how do I prevent this? Because it's, a lot of people say it's genetic, so sure. If it's in their genes, I want to figure out how to number one, educate them on it and make sure that they don't go down that same path.
Well, is there anything you could tell our audience about how not to go down that path, how to stay disciplined, and how to avoid becoming addicted to substances? I
mean, stay away from it, obviously, is the first thing, but if you have that kind of person, and people know, right? If you have an addictive personality. If you have that personality, you just need to be aware of it at all times. If you've gone through something in your life and you feel like this is your coping mechanism or this is helping you cope with your trauma, I would see a professional. Don't try to handle it yourself. There's counselors. My wife was a school counselor. She's got a master's degree in counseling. There's all kinds of counselings, therapists you could see, so talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, it's funny because I was an athlete in college and I was a president of a frat, so there was just a little bit of drinking being done there. And I can remember my first year of law school, there's drinking a lot. There's a lot of drinking that goes on in law school. People don't know that lawyers, very high drug addiction and alcoholism.
Right.
It's rampant in the legal profession, right? And at 22 years of age, I can remember after my first year of law school, I just said, why am I doing this? And I stopped drinking for 28 years. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I just didn't see the point anymore.
It didn't serve you.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
And now, you know, I'll have a drink with dinner,
Right.
but that's it. And I try to tell attorneys, nobody wants to be represented by a buffoon.
That's true.
You're always on as a litigator. It's one thing if there's different attorneys that have different roles, but if you're representing people in a courtroom, nobody wants to be represented by a drunk.
Right.
So you have to be careful.
Yeah, and if you can't do it socially, don't do it at all.
No.
You know?
No. Well, Cullen, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Glad to have you on the team with
Yeah.
GGL, and it was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. My pleasure.